Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to select a kit. And for this demonstration, we're just going to go with the first standard kit, and then we'll start digging into other crates as we move forward. Okay, so the rule of thumb here is you need to follow the tempo. So the amount of measures that you are counting determines whether you're going to place something at a certain point right next to it or skip a step. You'll see what I mean here in a second. Again, this is all subjective, just my own personal way of doing it. So let's just start at 120 BPMs. And wherever you put it on the T-Rack, it's not gonna sound the same at different BPMs if you just change it in the middle of it. You have to build around your BPMs because otherwise it's going to sound completely different in the way that you have it arranged. So basically, it's mostly muscle memory. You just gotta get used to what measures you have to use in which BPM. So what works best in 90, what works best in 80, what works best in 88, what works best in 70, what works best with 120, 140, 165, 100. I use all different types of BPMs in my music, and a lot of diversity that you hear between the going back and forth between hip hop and drum and bass. Those ones are usually done at 165 to 185 BPMs, and it becomes a little bit more complex, but it's just about stretching it out. So, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So, I usually go 4 is a good way to start, and how long you're gonna have it. The thing here is to go longer if it is a quicker BPM. So if I went 165 at a minimum, I would want to go 8. So we're going to do 4 here just for the sake of this demonstration over here, and we will figure things out as we move along. So okay, so we got a good snare here. So now this is 120 BPM. So let me just put it on 9 because 9 usually is a good spot for a lot of BPMs. 9 is a good spot for it, and you'll see what I mean in a second here. So okay, so that's good for a slower, but you're looking at 120 BPMs. You don't want a slow jam, do you? So hitting the 9 at a direct center isn't going to work for 120 BPM. So you could either change it to something else or keep it this slow if you would like to keep it this slow, just knowing that you could hop back and forth between going this route and the other route, which I'll show you guys in a second here. So we can either change the BPMs right here into something that works better with a dead center, or we could change it. Let's just say we want to stay on 120, and we're going to change it. So we're going to take these out here. So what works best for 120 if you want something higher tempo? 5 and 13 typically on the T-Rack. Yeah, and there you go. So that sounds more kind of like what 120 BPM. Say that's the tempo that you're looking for, and that's what you're going to keep it in. But you're not happy with that snare. I mean, it sounds great, but it's too basic. And here's what I got to say about that. With all of this, the biggest thing with building drums is to layer your snares. Now, every single time you add a snare element to another snare, it changes it to a whole different snare. So it's kind of the equivalent of adding reverb or whatever effects without actually adding the effects. But it's a little bit more organic than that, and it sounds a lot better. So it's when you get those cracks in the snare. So let's find another snare to pair on top of this. So you got this one. Those kind of pair together, but say I want the other one to sound louder, so I'm going to take this one down a little bit, just so it's kind of a subtle change, and you'll notice, okay, let's take it there. Notice the difference there? It's very subtle, but that's what I wanted to do, and that's what you need to do here if you want to really layer your drums to sound well. You got to get used to the concept of the sounds behind the sounds that make them sound the way that they do. People always ask me, how do I get that crack in my snare? And this is how you do it. You layer the snares and then you move accordingly. Say, just like you would layer different elements of your instrumentation over here. It's the same concept. It's the same concept as layering vocals. It's the same concept as any kind of layering you would do musically. So here we go. We're gonna do this snare. So, and you can't say you want something. You want something more beefy than just because it sounds okay, but you need something. Let's take it down an octave on these kits. So usually 5 in there. Kind of. Okay. So say you get one of these sticks, like one of the like wood block type of sounds or something. These also work, especially if you're working with hip hop or rock. But say you don't want that to be a real prevalent thing, and you kind of want to tuck that. But I don't know. That crack kind of makes it. Yeah. So let's see what it sounds like all the way up, put together with that. Remember, 5 and 13 is where we're at with this particular one because you want the fast pace. Without it, you notice the difference? Here comes with it. Without it. Some of you guys could hear it, some of you guys can't, and in the end, it'll make it sound better, and you don't quite know why, but we know why. It's because you layered your snares. That's why. I was going to go with this one up here. Okay, so that, we could do that one, because if we do this one, it's going to overpower the rest of them. So if we do there, so this little rim snare, see the difference there? Huge difference. And there's the crack in the snare. There's the crack in the snare that we're looking for. And that's works well because 120 BPMs is typically used for rock. And when you're typically using rock, you want to have that crack in the snare. Okay, so there you go. Moving forward from here, you could either do it one of two ways. You could either stay in the T-rack, or the T-rec, sorry. I'm thinking post-production here with the T-racks here. So you could either stay within the same kit and use the T-rec. Now, mind you that most of the beefiness within your drums, when you're building these, are going to occur with you layering the snare. So it's not going to be as necessary to layer the drums. And I'll get into that in a second here. So we could do it one of two ways. We could either work within the kit or do another kit. So let's just do another kit and keep that within its own element there. So we got our snare in its own little box there. We're going to go back to drums, and we're going to not do the same kit. So this is something good with you Fantom owners, and doing this on the Fantom, which I assume is why you're watching this and not just watching this for the sake of the acoustic or dynamic element of building drums, because that's where most of this comes in. But so I think this is new with the update, but there are a few new kits in here that I've noticed. But if you skip to another one over here, you have nothing but kicks and nothing but snares. So you could essentially build your own kits here. And I'm sure most of you guys know that already. But here, let's just go, let's just make this one a kit. Since we're doing the kits separately, let's do the kick separately and dig in. And world's our oyster here in the kick patch, for sure. Okay, let's go on the T retro. And we'll do 4 because the other one's at 4. We'll go good with that snare. See, that's another thing too. When you're developing drums, you got to have things that match and go with it. So this is what I was going to get into when it comes to picking out your kick drum. When you're picking out your kick drum, one of the basic things that you need to consider is what is going to be the musical composition. If you're going for something like a lo-fi with very little bass to it, you might want to have a little bit more of a heavier kick, you know. Or if you're just doing something really like analog, old school with the heavy kick, yeah, do it that way. But you know, the basic element to consider here is that whatever you're going to have in your composition of your bass is going to be the deciding factor of how you choose your drum kit. Or you could do what I do most of the time, which is just go with the flow, find out what works, and just build from the beginning. So instead of thinking about it from the element of choosing a bass line and what my bass line is going to sound like, we're going to leave it up to the kick. We're going to choose the kick first, and then we're going to choose a bass line that goes around that. So that's pretty much the thought process here. You could do it one of two ways. But see, you might run into a kick that you're like, oh, well, that'd sound good with this bass line, or that'd sound good with that bass line, and you know, yeah, you know. Sounds like it kind of matches. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit more complex, because when it comes to building your drums, especially when you're using the T-Rack, you just got to think of it every other. And a lot of it is just trial and error. And after you do trial and error for so long, you start getting used to the patterns that actually add up, and with which BPMs is I was kind of explaining earlier. So let's go with this. And so if you remember, the snares are in the 5 and the 13. So, and because the BPMs are what they are, we're going to hear them the way that they are. And the thing is, the trial and error, you just got to think, trial and error. Let's try it. Yeah, so in between, probably could use one right before the 13, right? It's boom, 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 boom. You hear what I'm saying? So you already figured out that this one right here is this. Okay, so that works right away, right? So you want to know, all right. So you got a basic drum pattern, but one thing when you have a basic drum pattern to consider, I mean, that sounds pretty decent to me. You'll find out whether or not it works with the composition, but usually you could build any kind of project you want around the drums. So as long as your drums are solid, the rest of your project will fall into place. Even if you make some risky choices, and some of it may sound like crap. You'll have good. Somebody will say, "Oh man, I don't like that sound, but the drums are good." People probably say about that about my music all the time because I take a lot of chances. I take. I'm one of those risk taking musicians. I don't say no to anything, and if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, I don't use it. But I always try, and a lot of things that I try end up working, and that is how I come up with the type of music that I come out with, and it sounds so original because I take risks that other people probably wouldn't. So okay, so we got our basic drum pattern here. Pretty rock and roll, huh? Yeah, there we go. So, another thing with building drum kits, don't be afraid to use your percussion. Go back into this first one because it's an actual drum kit and it's got the whole thing instead of doing the percussion. Oh, perfect. The first thing right there on the hi-hat. So the thing with using percussion, you put it in there first and you figure it out later. When it comes to the composition of your specific piece, obviously you're not going to want the hi-hats in there the whole time, or maybe you want to double up on the hi-hats and make them a quicker pace at certain elements of the song, like the chorus or anything like that. And cool, do that. And you want to do that with your projects. So what what I do personally, and it's user's choice here, is I build everything first, and then I take it out, and then I add the parts after that that I want to add for the chorus. A lot of the times I think ahead and plan ahead and program ahead. So when you see me doing the Phantom Fridays and see me doing them, that's why I decided to piece them together instead of doing the long format, because it just becomes too convoluted. And in the end, all you guys want to hear is the music. So here we go. Okay, so got our hi-hat. Just as the same as the rule of thumb with anything else on the T-Rack, every other. Usually when it comes to 120 BPMs and a rock and roll type of sound, it's every four. Technically, it's every fifth. So you do, here's how it goes. 1, 5, 9, oops, sorry, 13. So, and it's spread out, spaced out, right? So you want to do it quicker, just put the hats in between. So we want to do every four here, just because that's what we want to do at first, and for this particular demonstration. And yeah, here we go. See, I want another one on this drum beat. See how that doubles up there? And you say you could do this. Let's say, okay, I'll put another hat there. So yeah, that sounds pretty decent, but here's a tip that I have for you that I've learned over the years. Put it in the third. Huh, yeah. See? So you got the hat, and then following the other measure, you got the kick. So you want to do both. Let's do both. Let's put one right next to it to get that. There you go. I'm going to take that out, not use it for this. And now we have our basic drum pattern. So now we want to add some structure elements. Say you want to break this down. You want to keep all the elements in it, but you don't want the same snare. Say we want to move it to where it's slower like we originally intended, or what we started on, where we put everything on the 9. So you could do it one of two ways. You could either go in the pattern utility, you could copy and paste this, and then find everything and remove the elements that you want to remove, which I would recommend if you're just doing something with hats. But if you're building a totally different structure of drum elements, just do one from scratch. Just build one from scratch. It'll sound close, and even if you don't get the snares to match exact, the difference in the elements will add diversity to your production and give you an edge that you otherwise wouldn't have, and you wouldn't be able to figure it out because you're like, oh, well, what happened here? Well, when I went to go rebuild the drums over here, instead of putting the snare that cracked over here, I made it too loud or too low here or there. So we could go back in and look at it, or we could just take the risk and see how it goes with the sound and just do something all new. And now remember, it's within the same kit, so it's not going to sound weird. It's not going to sound off. It's just going to sound like it was played just a little bit more aggressively, and it may or may not be of benefit to your track depending on where you're going with it. Usually in a rock breakdown like this, where you put everything dead center on the snare, usually something like that cracked a little bit louder, and also with added cymbal or something like that is usually the move. It's usually a benefit. Okay, so let's see what we got here. And we used the what was it, stick like a wood block or something like that, it was we used that one, right? I don't remember. Let's do it. I think that was the last one we used to make it complete. Now our failure is complete. There it is. It was that one, right? All right. I always get that, little rim stick thing mixed up with wood blocks here. So here we go. Oh, we left this thing on the kick over here. Let's just leave those kicks in. Let's just do it with the kicks. And then the other one, this was it. Okay, so that's obviously a lot more. So to really make this pop, if you're using this for a breakdown, obviously it is not going to sound right now the way that it is. Because if you listen to the difference here, you got... It doesn't sound bad. I mean, it's aight, and going here, though. It's not like that. I mean, that's, yeah. That's radical, man. I mean, that's all the way in it. It may be the hats that add that extra element, but mind you want to take the hats out, or you know what you want to do? Instead of taking the hats out completely, say you want, so we had the other one on 4s the way that we were doing these hats. Well, let's grab that I think it was this hat, right? So let's grab that same hat, and instead of doing 4s, let's do all the way spread out. See? It puts some movement that otherwise isn't there. So just remember, if your hats aren't being utilized, just because they're not being utilized as a an extra sound within the pattern, still use your hats on top of the pattern because they add an element to them that gives them some swing. So, I mean, just by doing that, it's cool enough. But you know, we're trying to do a breakdown. We need like a crash. That's what we need. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Definitely not a roll for sure. Ooh, I like those hats. Yeah, well, if we're doing a breakdown, let's do that. Okay, so now to make them sound like that, the way that you want to make them sound, you're obviously not gonna. That doesn't sound right. Putting them. See, that doesn't sound right either. So this is the trick here. Put them reverse. Put them the way that the old snares are. See? It's opposite of the other ones, but because it is a cymbal, the percussion brings it out. Like I said, do not be afraid to use your percussion when it comes to elements of building drum patterns. So, and just like that, we have full, rich drums. Basic, yeah, rock, and then during the breakdown, and that ended up working without even changing the drum pattern here. Usually what you want to do is you want to change this drum pattern here. Let's just go to pattern utility, copy this real quick, and then we'll paste it. And we will go back and then take a look at it real quick. And the T-Rack, so we put that, where's that kick at? Oh yeah, that comes at the top, right? Okay, so here's that kick. It's kind of hard to put it anywhere else because that rim, that cymbal in the percussion, just makes that drum pattern work. But say you want to do something else, just you know, have the guts to try stuff. See if you. Here, let's do. There we go. See, I'm just trial and error here. Most of it's from what I see. We used a 7 over here, and it worked out the other way. I'm just following the example of the lead that I make for it. So let's see. So this is where it becomes a little bit more complex if you're trying to do a full breakdown and you want to do like a drum solo type thing, because obviously we're doing a pattern right now. But if you want to arrange something like a pattern that's a little bit more complex, like a like a double tap or something like that, this is where to do it at. I'm gonna go 6/7 right here and see what it, and see it's on 13 over here. Yeah, see, it worked. Don't be afraid to try new things, guys. And actually, that might work better on here. Let's see. No, it doesn't. It absolutely does not. Works both ways. Take the perk down. So, there you have it, folks. I hope this was helpful to some of you guys. Like I said, and I'll say it again, this is all subjective to users' choice, how they develop. I've just been getting this question a lot lately about how I develop my drums and how I make them so rich, and how I choose what I choose. And doing this usually applies in every other BPM, every other tempo that you use. It's just trial and error. You got to figure out what works with the math. Usually it's every two to every four. But yeah, a lot of us in the hip hop world, at least, are familiar with this T-Rack here workflow. I know it's kind of weird for some of you musicians to get used to, but us electronic musicians that are used to this kind of stuff, we're used to this kind of stuff. This is a really common format, and Roland excels at it. So, and I'm pretty happy with it. As much as I would be happier to do finger drumming on the pads, this has been a good substitute over the past year. But as you could tell, I have an MPC now, so I couldn't take it much longer. But yeah, so there it is. I'll elaborate and I'll keep doing videos on these as they as this channel grows. Put your comments down below. Let me know if there's anything in particular you want to know, any specific details that you figure that I should cover, because while I have access to this and I have all these years of music history and building this stuff, I'm really putting my knowledge to use here, not only with this hardware in front of me, but sharing this stuff with you guys. So I'm happy to take any questions and help out in any way possible. So, yeah, till next time. See you guys later.